We're just going to jump right into it. This section is going to be called ContradiQtions. And as you can see on the screen, it has a clever spelling.
You misspelled it. Can you tell us why?
Yeah, it's because this section is to talk about contradictions that Q has made while managing this team that we so love and hold dear to ourselves. So let's get into it. The first contradiction, I think around 2 weeks ago, the Royals played Boston at Fenway. We were in a late inning. I think it was either the 7th or 8th inning. And we were down a whole bunch of runs. And we were starting to make a comeback. I believe we were only down 2. I think it was like 6-8. And Bobby Witt Jr. singles to right field. Nick Loftin, who was on second, came around third, went home, and was thrown out by a mile, essentially. Now, looking at the replay, you can tell Vance Wilson, our third base coach, did not make a sign, did not put up a stop sign or send him until like he was essentially 40 or 50% down the baseline.
He was essentially past him or passing him.
Almost. He was pretty far down the baseline, and then you could kind of see one of Vance Wilson's arms go up, which I guess was a stop sign, I guess. Now, one of the worst stop signs ever, very indecisive from Vance. But regardless of all of that, the reason this is a contradiction is because after this game, Q was quoted as saying about Nick Loftin's base running, you gotta understand the game situation at that point. He's trying to be aggressive, probably got a little carried away knowing there were 2 outs. Normally you take chances with 2 outs, but when you're down by 3, apparently they were down by 3. And yeah, I guess they would have been down by 2 if he got there. When you're down by 3 and you're getting the go-ahead run to the plate right there, you gotta stay at third. So that's what he said, which is interesting. He basically threw his young player under the bus, which I wouldn't have too much of a problem with if I agreed that he made a mistake. But the other interesting thing is a week later, we are in a position where we were up 3-2 in the 8th inning, 1 out, no one on. John Rave decided to dive for a ball that he had a small chance of catching, and when he dove for that ball, the ball went by him, and they were able to get a triple out of that, and they would then score on the next play, eventually taking the lead and winning the game. Now, when Q was interviewed about this after the game, he had this to say. His instincts were to go and get it and give the best effort he can. If he could do it over again, we would probably have played it as a single, but he was a couple inches away from catching that ball. That's effort, that's intensity, and that's trying to do the best he can, and it's a physical error. This is crazy to me, because it's essentially the opposite of what you said about Loftin in what is also effort, intensity, and trying to do the best he can. But with Loftin, he essentially made it seem like it was a mental error. In his own quote, where he says, we probably would have played it as a single if we could do it again, that means it's definitely a mental error, in my opinion. So it's just crazy that Q has a double standard here for one player versus the other, especially when, in my opinion, the one he was more lenient on was the much worse one. And then our other contradiction this week, this quote comes from around the same time period. Q, I believe, was getting interviewed on a radio show, and he said this quote, I was not able to hear the context because this was quoted on on a screenshot or like on a graphic, not with the audio. So keep that in mind. But he said there's no point looking forward to the end of the week when you have your opportunity in front of you. I would 100% agree with that quote. He's spitting facts right there. Unfortunately, so often this year, Q will be in a situation in a close game. We're probably like tied or something going into the 5th, 6th. And then we lose the lead. We are now trailing by like 1 or 2. And Q decides, oh, we're losing by 1 or 2 runs. We're probably going to lose this game. I'm going to put in my worst bullpen guys so I can keep my good bullpen guys for the next games that we might have a better chance to win. Does this make sense if you're like in first place or you're comfortably in a wild card spot? Maybe. I think there's a little debate either way on that. But we're not. We're 4 games back. We have been 4 games back for a long time. And when you're in that position and every game matters at the end of the season like we are right now, you need to focus on winning the game right now. Not essentially almost give up by putting in your worst guys and saying we'll live to fight another day, which is what this quote says, but it's not what he does with his bullpen decisions. So it's just a little bonkers crazy for me to hear. And it's probably not that big of a deal because it's just one quote he said out of context, but it sure did trigger me. It did that.
He definitely is not taking advantage of opportunities that are in front of him a lot of the time in these situations.
Yeah, well, those are just some contradictions that I found from our good guy Matt.